Howdy, and welcome to the F1 Hatchet, and welcome to my Spain or Barcelona-Catalunya GP post-race reaction. What was your thoughts on this race? Did you find it exciting due to those first laps and those last laps, and have a little bit of interesting dilemma with the pit strategy? Or was it kind of dull because that middle section really didn't have anything to really play for, and it was just kind of a figuring out where people would end up due to where they were pitting? And did the controversy at the end, make things more exciting, more interesting, or does it just casting a shadow over this race? What is your thoughts? I'm kind of interested in to hear those, and if you would leave those in the comments, I'd appreciate it. I think the controversy at the end was kind of unnecessary. It kind of puts a little dim light on this race. It wasn't the greatest race. It's probably maybe an average race. We had a little bit of interesting stuff going on at the beginning with the starting of the race, and it kind of dulled out, and you're trying to figure out where you were, in my viewpoint, of where people were going to end up after all of the pit stops and where their pit stops were going to end up. But there was some interesting dilemmas there because it was the undercut strategy versus the overcut strategy, and it was going to be a 2-stop or a 3-stop race. So there was some interesting decisions that needed to be made there. And of course, at the end of the race, when you had a lot of those getting together after that safety car, the shootout for the end was kind of interesting as well. So I found that kind of interesting, but of course the middle section was a little bit dull, so I probably didn't give it an average race. It's not quite where I wanted it to be. But what was your thoughts? Like normal, I worked my way from the back of the pack to the front of the pack, going through each driver, telling you, my thoughts on that driver, how they did in this race, and if anything happened to them, I will try to give you that information as well. So we start off with Lance Stroll, who's qualified in 14th, but then didn't participate because they determined that there was some injuries to his hands from the previous that they needed to take care of instead of doing the race based on the doctor's assessments. And so he decided to withdraw from this race. And of course, they didn't have anybody that was qualified in that car for this weekend. So they had to leave that spot blank. And so that's why there's a cross between the 20th, because he is in that 20th position, but he didn't start. So he didn't really gain that notoriety to even finish the race because he didn't even start the race in that regard. Now, this got me thinking a little bit about Aston Martin overall with their setup and where they are. I know there's a lot of people that are saying, all depends on where Fernando goes and who's going to end up replacing his seat or whatnot on that front. But I started thinking, if Stroll happens to have some issues with his hands that are not going to be easily fixed, is he going to basically retire from Formula One with that strain on his hands? And then what will his dad do? Will he continue on with the Aston Martin brand and how to push forward on his vision that he saw for them, or other things will happen on that? And will they pull in other drivers for that Aston Martin brand? So it got me thinking about some interesting things that could happen there. I doubt that they'll happen anytime soon, but I kind of just ran across my mind and maybe start to think. And so I figured I'd bring that up here as well. Then we come to Alexander Albon, who started off in 11th and ended up in 19th after a DNF after having front wing damage early on in the race, and then having another damaging front wing when he was fighting Lawson. Kind of figured it was too much. He kind of came in and decided to retire that car. He did lose 3 spots the very first lap, so he didn't have a great start to even start off with this, and they were having a bad weekend altogether, only getting up into 11th to the max starting position for Williams. And then, of course, I had that front wing damage, and he pitted on lap 6. And then they had some more damage on lap 26, again, with Lawson, some contact with him. And because of that, getting pushed off and whatnot, he ended up getting a 10-second penalty. So he pitted on lap 26 to, supposedly, retire the car, but then they went back out for one more lap to basically get that penalty out of the way. Then we come to Kimi Antonelli, who started off in 6th and ended up in 18th after another DNF with a power unit failure, when this is kind of strange for Mercedes. And so I'm wondering if what's going on with Mercedes, because I think they ran out of engines. And so they're going to have to do a lot more penalties replacing engines when they don't have any in that block. So he did lose a spot at the very first lap. He did pass Gasly though on lap 7 for 20. Sorry, on lap 24 for 7th position. As I said, he had on lap 55 had that PSU failure, pulled off from the side of the track around turn 10, causing that safety car to come out. So that kind of ended up in that late run for everybody to change tires on that pretty much a free pit stop, and that kind of gave us the shootout for the end. Then we come to Oliver Behrman, who started off in 14th and ended up in 17th. He also lost a spot in the very first lap, so didn't have the greatest start. He had a 3-stop strategy, stopping on lap 8 from switching from a set of softs to a set of mediums, going to lap 35 on those set of mediums, switching to another set of mediums, and then on lap 54, when that safety car came out, switched to a set of softs. He did pass Ocon for 13th on lap 63, and then gained a 10-second penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage, which pushed him back down into that 17th position. So not a great race for Oliver Behrman and or Haas in general, because right now after him comes Esteban Ocon, who started off in 16th and ended up in 16th. He tried to do he ended up doing the 2-stop strategy, stopping on lap 20, switching from a set of softs to a set of mediums, going all the way to lap 43 before switching to another set of mediums. And then, of course, that safety car came out. He stayed out there, but it didn't really help him that much because he was still in that really used set of mediums that kind of got passed and dropped back into the field from that point. He did pass Franco Colapinto for 17th on lap 27. This gets us to Franco Colapinto, who started off in 18th and ended up in 15th. He had a 3-stop strategy, stopping on lap 14, switching from softs to a set of mediums, and on that set of mediums going to lap 39 before switching to another set of softs. And during that safety car on lap 54, switching from softs to another set of softs. I have him passing Ocon for 16th on lap 66. Then we have Carlos Sainz, which is the other side of the Williams, who, again, had a horrible weekend altogether, starting off in 17th, so not even making it out of Q1. Ended up in that 14th spot. He had a 3-stop strategy, stopping on lap 9, switching from a set of softs to another set of softs, going to lap 34 on that set of softs before switching to a set of mediums, and then on that safety car, switched to another set of softs from that set of mediums on lap 55. He also had a long first stop, which didn't help him all in this run. I didn't quite catch exactly what happened in that stop, but I know it was fairly long in that running. He did pass Albon for 14th on lap 27 and passed Franco for 17th on lap 38. Then we come to Yuki Tsunoda, who started off in 19th and ended up in 13th. So he had a horrible, qualifying setup, and so he ended up doing some modifications under Parc Ferme, which made him start from the pit lane. He did have a 3-stop strategy, stopping on lap 8, switching from a set of mediums to a set of softs. Then on lap 24, switching to another set of softs, and then going to lap 54 to switch to another set of softs. He did pass Ocon for 13th on lap 39, passed Ocon again for 16th on lap 48, and passed Ocon again for 14th on lap 64. So what made it really confusing for me for Yuki was, starting off in those mediums and then only going 8 laps on those mediums before switching to a set of softs kind of was weird to me. I'm not sure what that strategy was. I'm not sure if he caught some issues and had to come in or if there was something else going on. But it was kind of odd to me when everybody else started off in softs and he was the only one to start off in mediums. I figured he would end up going longer on that first stint than most people to try to gain some advantage there, and it didn't turn out to be that case. So I'm not sure exactly what that strategy was, and it kind of hurt him overall, I think, keeping him out of that point range. And of course, the qualifying session for him wasn't that good, so he needs to kind of work on that as well, try to get him back in that running, being a little bit more competitive with his teammate. The other thing I found interesting was, we have him being behind everyone. He in the Red Bull, he's behind his teammate in the other Red Bull. He's also behind both Racing Bulls in this race. And that kind of puts more pressure on him to really find what he needs to do in that, mother team of the Red Bull team to figure out if he can really compete. So we'll have to see how that plays out in the next couple of races. Then we come to Gabriel Borleto, who started off in 12th and ended up in 12th. I think it was his highest ranking so far from qualifying, so he did a really good job on qualifying. He had a 2-stop strategy, stopping on lap 19, switching from a set of softs to a set of mediums, and taking those mediums all the way to lap 49 before switching to another set of softs. And again, I think that kind of hurt them in the end when they probably should have had that extra set of tires for that shootout at the end, where those softs were pretty worn out by that point and kind of got swamped in the end. But of course, him making it into Q2, trying to use all those tires to the advantage, I think that's what they ended up trying to shoot for instead of the race side of it, and thinking that there was going to be, a 3 pit stop strategy in that. So we'll see if they can get their strategies together a little bit better, and if Gabriel can pull this out a little bit more often, that'll help them in that running. He did pass Sainz for 13th on lap 35, and he passed Ocon for 11th on lap 61. And this goes us to Liam Lawson in that final 11th position for the bottom 10. He started off in 13th and ended up in 11th. He had a 2-stop strategy as well, stopping on lap 18, switching from a set of softs to a set of mediums, taking that set of mediums to lap 44, or before switching to another set of softs. He did pass Borleto for 9th on lap 14, passed Hulkenberg for 9th on lap 24, passed Albon for 12th on lap 26, then having some contact with his front wing, which made Albon have to come back in. He had that contact with Behrman on lap 32, but it just kind of bumped around, and then he ended up being able to pass Behrman for 10th on lap 35, and then he passed Behrman again for 11th on lap 53. So he had a lot of bit of contact in this race. Good to see him, keeping that out without getting any of those penalties, but still, getting his elbows out, trying to get as most as he could, trying to get into that last point position to get him more points for this season, as he got points last weekend. So it's good to see him fighting that. He's still a little bit lagging behind his teammate, so he has some work to be doing there. But overall, I think it's a decent weekend for Liam Lawson, especially with all the contact that he ended up having and not getting the penalties like we've seen him in the past. This gets us to the top 10, where we find Max Verstappen, who started off in 3rd and ended up in 10th. He did gain 1 spot at the very first lap. Had a 4-stop strategy in this race kind of thrown on him, and he stopped on lap 13, switching from a set of softs to a set of softs, going to lap 29 on that second set of softs to a set of mediums, taking that set of mediums to lap 47 before switching to another set of softs. And then lap 55, when that safety car came out, he switched to a set of hards because he ran out of tires, and he was really confused and kind of lost on that front hards, and tried to get those hards warmed up into the point. You could really see him struggling at the end of this, and I think that led to a lot of his frustration overall, because he was doing decently. That 3 pit strategy was working out for him earlier on, but when they got to the end, I'm not sure if it would have been better to stay on that set of softs and just had that really old set of softs, or being on that new set of hards in that regard. It's hard to say for me how that would have played out. But anyway, that led to a lot of frustration for him that caused some of this anxiety and confusion later on in that last bit of the race. He did pass Lando on the very start of the race and gaining that second position, so he did a really good job there and get that good start. He passed Isaac Haijar for 7th on lap 15, passed Kimi for 5th on lap 18, passed Russell for 3rd on lap 20, passed Leclerc for 3rd on lap 36. And he also got that 10-second penalty for causing a collision with Russell, kind of dropped him back from that 5th position that he would have entered this race in, and all the way back into that 10th position. So that really caused that confusion on him. So when he was doing the restart, of course, he was on that hard set of tires, wasn't quite where those tires needed to be. Ended up trying to keep them there. Had a mistake and put that rear tire off into the grass, making him twist that car a little bit, losing some ground, and that's where Charles Leclerc was able to gain the ground and pass him. And then George Russell was coming up alongside him, had the actual advantage in that corner, but pushed. Max went wide, came back in front, which was kind of against the rules because they should have given that position to George. So the team came on the radio, making him, relinquish that position. And I think he was really pissed off at that because of the hard tires in general and where he was and how that, looks, because the new rules are not quite to his liking, which I can understand because it's really hard to see exactly and determine when those situations are. And so this came to the controversy. So he's trying to let George by, and then he basically, from all it looks like, he kind of just went straight and hit George again when he was coming past him on the bumping those tires. I'm not positive, but I think it was probably him trying to say, okay, you got ahead, but I want to get back into that running so I can basically be ahead at that apex and take the lead again behind him, and so I think that was his mindset. It didn't turn out that way, and so he ended up colliding with George in that corner, and that basically gave him that 10-second penalty for causing a collision at the end of the race. And so I don't think it was directly intentional that he was going to hit them, but I think he was trying to push himself back into that front running, going around the corner to try to prove a point, which didn't turn out the best way. We'll have to see how that plays out in the future between George and Max and see if things will die down in a couple weeks when they get to Canada or not. This gets us to Fernando Alonso, who started off in 10th and ended up in 9th, thanks to Max, dropping back down to 10th. Gaining points for the first time this season. So that's really good to see Fernando finally getting some points after struggling so much during this season. He had a 3-stop strategy, stopping on lap 15 from a set of softs to a set of mediums, taking those mediums to lap 42 before switching to another set of softs, and going to lap 54 on that set of softs before switching to another set of softs for that final run. He passed Franco for 18th on lap 19, passed Sainz for 17th on lap 19, passed Albon for 13th on lap 27, passed Behrman for 12th on lap 53, passed Ocon for 12th on lap 61, passed Bortoleto on lap 64 for 11th, and passed Lawson for 10th on lap 65, getting them up into that 10th position. And then when Max 10-second penalty, pushing it up into that 9th position, gaining 2 points for him in the season, putting him on the board for the Drivers' Championship, which is always good to see. I know he's had a lot of bad luck lately with his car, kind of giving out in those days that he would have potentially could have gotten some points. So it's kind of good to see him back on the board and get him on the points to help him in this running. Hopefully that gives him that extra confidence, that extra, push to, proceed on through the rest of the season, and we'll see more of him in the future. Then we come to Pierre Gasly, who started off in 8th and ended up in 8th. He had a pretty clean race, starting off, had 3 stop strategy, stopping on lap 10 from a set of softs to a set of softs, going to lap 31 on that second set of softs before switching to a set of mediums, and then of course on lap 55 during that safety car, switching back to another set of softs and ending up in that 8th position. So a good run for him, getting some extra points for Alpine. Unfortunately, that didn't play out entirely for the whole team, but it was good to see him getting some more points, getting back into that running. That said, he had a clean race. I didn't see any kind of incidents from him or any passes, so he was kind of like stationary in that running, but it was still a good job for him, I think. Then we come to Isaac Haijar, who started off in 9th and ended up in 7th. He had a 3-stop strategy as well, stopping on lap 19, switching from a set of softs to a set of mediums, taking that set of mediums to lap 48 before switching to another set of softs, and that set of softs went to lap 55 before switching to another set of softs during that safety car. He did pass Behrman for 11th on lap 21 and passed Gasly for 8th on lap 28. Doing an excellent job for Isaac, getting them up in that Racing Bulls, getting some more decent points for the Racing Bulls, getting pushed up into that, 7th position because of Max Verstappen dropping back behind him, but it's still a good run for him in showing what he can do in that Racing Bulls. Basically outdoing both Red Bulls in this point because of that penalty that Max got himself. So being the leader on that front of this race was kind of cool to see. We see, the second Red Bull behind the second Racing Bull, and then we have the first Racing Bull person ahead of the first Red Bull team driver this weekend. So that's, of course, due to a penalty, but that's kind of interesting to see as well, that whole dynamic of those two teams and how they're going to play out in the future. And I expect Isaac Hydjar to have great things happen to him through the next few seasons, as he really seems to be thriving. This gets us to Lewis Hamilton, who started off in 5th and dropped down to 6th. He did gain a spot at the very first lap. He had a 3-stop strategy, stopping on lap 16 from a set of softs to a set of mediums, going to lap 40 on that set of mediums before switching to a set of softs, and then lap 55 switched to another set of softs. During that safety car period, he did have a slow pit stop on that second, pit stop strategy for front right tire, not being able to get that off and on quickly, so that kind of delayed that running, which hurt him in this regard, I think, to get him up closer to fighting with Nico Hülkenberg. But overall, a decent race for Lewis. I know it's a drop back in the field, so I know it's not quite where he wanted to be, but still some decent points for Ferrari, which helped him out in the overall constructors' standings when you get to that point. Then we come to Nico Hülkenberg, who started off in 15th and ended up in 5th. He gained 4 spots in the very first lap, so he did an excellent job on that first lap trying to maneuver and get around people without getting into trouble and causing any damage to him or penalties to him. So that was really good to see. He had a 3-stop strategy, stopping on lap 9, switching from a set of softs to a set of mediums. He took that set of mediums to lap 45 before switching to another set of softs. And like everyone else, on lap 56, during that safety car period, switched to another set of softs. He did pass Gasly for 9th on lap 28, passed Borletto for 9th on lap 48, passed Hydjar for 7th on lap 61, and passed Lewis Hamilton for 6th on lap 65. So he was able to even compete with some of the higher end grouping at the end, getting up into that 6th position, and then gaining that extra position because Max had that penalty that dropped him past Nico Hülkenberg. So getting up into that 5th overall for the final running was an excellent job for him, and I think we'll give him the driver of the day, even though I know it went officially to Max Verstappen. I can't, pass up Nico Hülkenberg in that Kick Sauber car that's, been pretty much the slowest car around the track this season so far, and being able to make his way all the way up into that 5th spot during this race was just outstanding to me. And so I think he deserves the driver of the day instead of Max. But who is your driver of the day? Do you think Max deserved it? Do you think it really played out in that regard, putting pressure on the McLarens? Do you think Oscar won it because he was able to dominate this race from basically start to finish? Who would you give the driver of the day to? This gets us to George Russell, who started off in 4th and ended up in 4th. He did lose 2 spots at the very first lap, so he didn't have the greatest start. And I know they had, them coming on the radio basically telling them to concentrate in this when he was starting to complain about other drivers, just to get your head back into the game and start focusing on where you are and see if you can gain any position. So that was kind of interesting to hear. He did have a 3-stop strategy, stopping on lap 20, switching from a set of softs to a set of mediums, going to lap 41 on those set of mediums before switching to a set of softs. And again, like most everybody else, stopping on lap 55 during that safety car to another set of softs. He did pass Kimi for 6th on lap 45 and passed Max for 4th on lap 65. And of course, that was when the lap before, I think he was getting there and getting ready to pass him. Should have passed him according to the official rules, but Max went off track and gained that advantage. And so his team, Red Bull, came back and said, you have to give that place back to George. And so during that mix, he was trying to give that back, and so had that contact with Max, causing some damage, at least according to Russell coming on the radio saying he had damage to his car on those last laps, but was able to still make it through and continue to get to that fourth position overall in that mix. So could he have put more pressure on Charles Leclerc if he didn't have any damage? I don't know. I doubt it. I don't think it was that much damage in that regard, but apparently, at least according to George, or maybe it was just trying to, expand everything, to make it more of a penalty style situation for Max to, get the advantage on him in this race by coming on the radio and complaining about the damage that was given by that contact. This gets us to Charles Leclerc, who came in third. He started off in seventh. He did gain 2 spots the very first lap, so he did a good job there, getting ahead, getting going. He had a 3-stop strategy, stopping on lap 17, switching from a set of softs to a set of mediums, going to lap 40 on that set of mediums, before switching to another set of mediums, and then going to lap 55 during that safety car, switching to another set of softs. He did switch places with his teammate Lewis Hamilton for 4th on lap 10, as he on that little bit better strategy. He had a little bit cleaner tires during that marker, so that kind of gave him the edge over his teammate during that first stint, saving that tire instead of, ended up trying to push those in qualifying, is what my understanding was. And then he was able to pass Max Verstappen for 3rd on lap 61, and that's mainly when Max was on those set of hards, and he said he put his tire off under the grass, kind of delaying that car, kind of putting a twist spin that he was able to recover from, but of course it pushed that time period back, giving him a little bit easier time for Charles Leclerc to get and pass Max Verstappen. Now, would have he passed Max Verstappen anyway? There's a possibility, but it would have been a little bit harder to do, maybe on the straightaways, since he was on that set of hards versus the Charles Leclerc's set of softs. It would have been still easily be done, but during that mistake, that rarely he makes, he really gave the door open for Charles Leclerc, and he took a full advantage of that, getting up there on the podium. Good to see him in that Ferrari get back on the podium in this regard, as he's been down so much in regard to the whole setup and scheme of Ferrari. This gets us to the McLarens, who's back to the McLarens, who started off in second, ended up in second for Lando Norris. He did lose that 1 spot at the very first lap, but was able to reclaim that fairly early on. He had a 3-stop strategy, stopping on lap 21, switching from a set of softs to a set of mediums, taking that set of mediums to lap 48 before switching to a set of softs. And then when that safety car came out on lap 55, they double stacked those McLarens and was able to switch to another set of softs. He did pass Max again, regaining that second position on lap 13, but of course that hurt him quite a bit, losing that position because he didn't gain the distance behind his teammate. So he's kind of stuck behind Max a little bit longer than he probably should have been overall that time, but was able to eventually get to that second position, and that kind of played out till the end, where then he potentially had another set or time to be able to actually put pressure on his teammate, but he was still managed to just come in second instead of, being able to pass his teammate at the very end. But it gave it a little bit more exciting race because of that shootout at the very end. Oscar Piastri, who started off in first and ended up in first, so he had an excellent qualifying session, getting into that first position ahead of his teammate, not making the mistakes, gaining the tenths that he needed to be in pole position. He ended up having a really good start, keeping in the front, so it was a good job from there, that aspect as well. He had a 3-stop strategy, right, but kind of aligned with his teammate, just getting that 1 extra lap in for each of those first 2 stops, stopping on lap 22, switching from that set of softs to a set of mediums, and then going to lap 49 on that set of mediums before switching to another set of softs, and then of course double stacking that those McLarens on lap 55 for another set of softs for that shootout at the end, where he had the fastest lap on lap 61. So he did a really good job making the fastest lap. Pretty much dominated throughout this weekend in that McLaren over his teammate. So we'll see if Lando Norris can come back in a couple of weeks in Canada to put more pressure on his teammate Oscar, and see who comes out on top in a couple of weeks, and keep that drivers' championship battle going and on, hopefully to the end of the season, because we always like to see that battle for that drivers' championship go on as long as possible and not be closed out at the end. This gets us to the kind of a race summary for the times that I have collected. Of course, there's the good start from Oscar, maintained the lead, got out in front. By lap 5, he had a 2.53 second lead over Max. Lap 10, he had a 3.5 second lead over Max. By lap 15, it kind of switched over, so he had a 4.2 second lead over Lando. By lap 33, he had a 5 second lead over Lando. By lap 45, he had a 4.2, so it's dropping just a little bit, but not near enough to put a lot of pressure on Oscar. But he had a 4.2 second lead over Lando. Then on 55, that safety car came out, dropping all those time gaps, putting pressure on him. And that safety car came out because of Kimi pulling off to the side of the track where they had to collect the car. And that went on for lap 60. So it was about 5 laps full laps that they had on the safety car. I know some people were complaining about the number of laps under the safety car. They think they could have gone racing a lap or 2 earlier, which would give us a little bit more, on-track action. And from what I could tell, that's the case. They probably could have at least done it at least a lap sooner when they let all those, lap cars go by. They didn't really have to let them catch up the full lap around. So they probably could have done that. And I know that there was some debate on when they had those lap cars go around. They could have had them go out a little sooner than they did. But of course, we always want the safety first. We don't want any kind of incidences on track that could have been avoided because of safety concerns and yellow flags and safety car situations. So I'm not too terrible, since we still got, good 5 to 6 laps at the end for that race. It really kind of played out in my regard. So I would have taken a time frame on lap 60, but since we were behind the safety car, so I went a lap later than that for lap 61. It was a 0.9 second lead from Oscar over Lando. And then by the end of lap 66, it was a 2.46 second lead from Oscar over Lando. And that gave you the good feel of the race, I think, hopefully. And, kind of give you how that played out, and what would you think, how this ranked in your viewpoint compared to the other races. So what did this do to our driver's standings? The first thing we see is Yuki's dropping back to 15th spot, still with that 10 points. Pierre Gasly staying in that 14th spot, even though he gained a couple of points to have 11 points overall. Then we have Carlos Sainz and Lance Stroll dropping back behind Nico Hülkenberg, who now has 16 points and moved up to that 11th position. We have Esteban Ocon dropping back into that 10th position over Isaac Haijar, who gained some more points and jumped over him to that 9th position now with 21 points. And then, of course, we have the same number going down to Oscar, who's still in the lead now with 186 over Lando Norris's 176 points. So a good 10-point gap there now, but we'll have to see how the next few races end up overall. Of course, Max Verstappen only got a point, so he dropped back a little bit behind. George Russell gained some ground on Max in that regard, as well as Charles Leclerc on that running as well. So we'll have to keep those in mind for the next few races to see if they can really put pressure on each other or not. And for the constructor standings, what do we have here? I was expecting the turnover for that second position, whereas that was really close last weekend, but I wasn't expecting the big changeover near the back of the field. So we have Alpine, even though they gained points, dropping back down to that 10th position over the constructor standings, with Aston Martin gaining a couple of points up to that 16th marker, making that 9th position overall, but still losing ground. Kick Sauber jumping up to that 8th position with that fabulous run from Nico Hulkenberg, gaining 10 points, dropping them all the way up to that 16-point marker, but gaining the advantage because they finished higher than the Aston Martins this weekend. And we have Haas steady with that 26 points, but dropping back to that 7th position as the Racing Bulls hop over them now with 28 points. Williams stays steady at that 54-point marker and that 5th position. And then we have Red Bull dropping back to that 4th marker after that incident, only gaining a point. So they now have 144, where Mercedes, still drops back, but now has 159. And Ferrari jumping both of those now with 165 points. So they jump up to that 2nd position. And McLaren's kind of taking off a little bit farther in the lead for that constructor standings now with 362. So what do we have coming up next? We have the Canada or Gilles Villeneuve or GP race on June 15th. So a couple of weeks. We have a little week off, I believe. It has a length of 2.71 miles. You'll have a 70 laps being run for the GP race, for a total race distance of 189.686 miles. It was first introduced in 1978 and has a lap record holder of Valtteri Bottas in 2019 with 1 minute 13.078 seconds. So until then, I will see you on the grid, and farewell.